So this is aloo GOSHT, which is, aloo GOSHT just means potato and meat, basically. But I'm making the recipe, I'm actually going to cook my own recipe, so this is a bit exciting. So this is a working manuscript from my new book that I'm writing with Murdoch Books, release date 2025, so don't worry, you've got some time. Aloo GOSHT is almost like a lamb casserole, you know, it's sort of the dish that appears at, you know, that everyone in the family loves. Like when Dad used to make this, it was just the easiest, most delicious of his meals. I just totally always loved it. So what I'm going to show you throughout this cook is a few transferable techniques to create beautiful, warm flavours in your food, the kind of flavours that are reminiscent of family gatherings where everyone's getting along and no one wants to be anywhere else, and there's plenty of affection and gentle laughing and conversation. So you can do that with taste. That's the beautiful thing about masala, is it gives this this ability to eat moods, you know, eat emotions, eat memories. So first thing we're going to do is parboil some, or pressure cook some tomatoes. That's a good question. Where did I put my tomatoes? Oh, yeah, look at my messy dining room table. It's like the stash spot for all of the junk while we're filming. Give them a look, Trav, and show my messy dining room table.
Crossing the line.
Yeah, the fourth wall. It's horrible. Anyway. Oh yeah, this is what I see all day. Hello, camera. So what we're doing is pressure cooking. Now what I will say is, when it comes to tomato, and I do have a video on this already, so I'll probably just put the link in the description. Let's close that. Okay, so a few things about really beautiful, warm, enveloping flavour. Straight away. Use, so this is a lamb shoulder with lots of fat. It's farmed from a single paddock. Chippy loves it. Whenever he hears the lid come off, I see his little face pop up. He's being very good by being outside. Normally he's at my feet in the kitchen. But it's a specific, well, it's bred from two different types of lamb to create kind of a specific fat content, but also it feeds on the salt marshes at the head of the Blackwood River. So it's just this really incredible conduit of sweet, tender, forward lamb flavour that's not like overwhelming. You know, people who don't love lamb find it like almost a little bit gamey. It doesn't have that quality. So creating beautiful flavour means having a really beautiful sweet protein with a really lovely fat content. Using soft masala, but more than that, using a soft salt. So that we're going to use a fine pink salt for this recipe. And then in a traditional Indian regional cooking, when we're adding tomatoes, which we don't always do, but we're doing in this regard to make sort of like the masala base, is to actually, instead of putting them in fresh and wet, which will create a sharper, more higher tone character, is to pressure cook them just for like a couple of minutes, just until you hear one whistle, and then skin them and then puree them. And once you've done that to a tomato, instead of being like high toned and exciting, it becomes like broad and soft and enveloping. So it's the difference between, you know, sharing a hug with an excited 2-year-old or, you know, leaning into like a grandmother's cuddle, which is just much more stability and softness and sort of depth. Yeah, it smells different. Okay, what I'm going to talk to you about is a salt technique, and this is when we put the salt in, to me, has become such an interesting experiment. It changes a dish completely. What we're talking about with this dish is, I want depth of flavour from mustard oil, but I want delicacy and beauty. Now, whenever we put salt in the dish, whether it's like at the base, so the first thing we put in as the oil's heating and the whole spice go in, or sort of at a midpoint after the meat's browned a bit or the produce has taken a bit of colour, or at the end as a finish, is going to impact the expression of masala. Salt is responsible for drive. I'm going to put a video on fine pink salt and how it does tell that story of drive in the description box. Because salt tells the story of drive, it can only drive the flavour, or it can only drive masala from the entrance point of the salt itself. Sounds like a riddle. If I put masala in the beginning with the mustard oil, it's going to pick up all that mustard oil flavour and drive it through the dish. I don't want that. I want some of the texture and the darkness, but I don't want it to be too loud. So what I'm actually going to do is do a gentler browning process. So I'm not going to create a lot of heavy caramelisation in the meat, which also makes it appear softer. But I'm going to brown in the mustard oil and the whole spice, and I'm only going to add the salt once I have sort of completed that portion of the cook. So what that means is the salt comes in at this level, the browning and the intensity of the oils under here, and this is just going to sit at the base, but it's not going to talk too loudly because there's no salt to raise its volume. And instead the salt's going to come in here and start to really increase the volume of the gentler spice on the top. So it's like this real kind of finesse, but finesse is what you need when you're telling emotional stories through food. Lastly, potato. Normally, I would deep fry or roast in the oven or do something to like affect the texture of the potato before I use it. This we're going to keep raw, again, because the raw potato going into the dish at the end just before we pressure cook keeps the flavour of masala very broad, very open. But if I eat raw potato, it's really wet. Very cool and very light. It only becomes heavy once it's cooked. So I want that quality in the end dish. So they're going to stay raw. So they're just these little decisions that we make throughout the cook, knowing how produce translates into emotion, knowing that light and pretty means that we're going to feel like we're eating something that's warm and soft. Over time, using masala like this and watching videos on how emotion and spice correlate and how the sensory body is so intelligent about receiving that information, just enables us to be like really direct with flavour. I think that's probably enough potato. One of the things with mustard oil, which I don't do all the time, but to sort of minimise the impact of the taste of it, because remember this is our soft beautiful dish and mustard oil is pretty heavy, you can actually just take it up to very high heat in the vessel that you're going to cook in it with, let it smoke and then turn it off and let it cool down and then use it again, heat it up again to use it. And that will do a couple of things. Well, essentially you're tempering the oil and removing some of the aroma. So you'll still get the inherent quality of mustard oil, which is like that beautiful heat, floral, shadow, horseradishy kind of wasabi, but just with not the same intensity through the dish. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'll go through that cooking process. Just going to cut the lamb, but just into sort of, good chunks, like 1 inch, 2 inch chunks, depending on. Well, it needs to actually have quite a lot of volume, the pieces of meat, in order to kind of go through that pressure cooking process and hold masala well and take on the oil and the fat. It's very heavy flavour masala. Even when you make it beautiful, it's like there's a lot going on, and so your produce really does need to be prepared. This is a shoulder. And it's probably about 1.3 kilos. Some of it's fat, so I'm going to keep some of it off. Oh, that's the mustard oil. I can smell it like next level. Let me check if it's smoking. Yep. So have a look. All right, now as I said, did I click?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now as I said, I get at the beginning, maybe I said this, I don't remember, but I'm actually not going to talk you through all of the masala, because what's important, remember, is we're creating a filling. So we want to add the salt after we've done the heavy lifting with the oil and the browning, so that we're not carrying too much of that weight through the dish. We want like a sweet protein, so I've got this beautiful Arcady lamb shoulder. I want my potatoes to be quite light instead of caramelised and heavy, so I'm using them raw. And I want my tomato bed to be, you know, really warming and broad, not sort of, so I've pressure cooked them and pureed them. So I'm not going to explain every single spice that I put into it. Those explanations will, however, be in the written recipe, and the written recipe is in the description below. So what I'm going to do is follow my own recipe so that I actually, you know, do the right thing. So we're going to add bay leaf and hing, or asafoetida, first up. Ooh. So like 2 or 3 bay leaves and a pinch of asafoetida. So that's garlic and onion replacement. Can you use garlic and onion, says Trav? No, you can't, because, hang on, let me just pop this in. So this is the lamb going in. I mean, you can, of course you can, it's your kitchen, you can do whatever you want, but I'm saying no in terms of getting the actual feel for what we're doing with this, which is creating very soft, beautiful flavour. Garlic and onion is actually not that soft. It creates, there's quite a lot of sulphur, there's a lot of astringent quality, it's quite heating, so yeah, it has a whole different impact on the dish. Now this is on high heat. Normally, in a normal Kashmiri meat dish, I would be browning really, really heavily with like yogurt and ghee or mustard oil, and using like whey or chilli water to kind of prolong and elongate the browning process up to 90 minutes, easily, anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. I don't want that density in this dish. I really do want it to feel like something that's just classically beautiful and homely, and so we're keeping it quite brief. By brief I mean browning until there's colour, but not until it's kind of crusty and caramelised. So I'm going to time this for you, it's probably around 10 minutes. Without salt in there, it's like, you know, fatty and sweet, but not like, not hard, or the asafoetida gives it a little bit of seasoning. I'll be back 1 sec. Come here and have a little look. I would like to show you something. So, one of the ways to assess sort of browning meat in this kind of circumstance isn't just colour, but it's actually tension in the protein. So have a look at this. When I see how the meat has a little bit of spring. So raw meat doesn't do that, it has like a thud. But once you get some heat into the protein, it starts to create tension. Tension in protein is a translator of masala. It's a translator of flavour. So when we're working with different dishes, you'll see in the chokta recipe, I'll put the link in the description below, heat tension is essentially entirely how we create the flavour. In a dish like this where we're using more spice, it's a part, but it's not all of it. So very tight tensions result Very tight tensions result in harder flavours. Softer tensions result in softer flavour expression. So I'm actually going to stop the browning here because I want it to stay quite soft. To arrest browning, essentially what we need to do is apply more liquid. That will stop the browning process. And to change the temperature. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of water and Kashmiri chilli powder. So this is heat. Putting the chilli in water allows it to disperse really evenly through the dish. Then we're going to add the salt, and then we're basically going to add the masala and change the temperature. So we're going to pressure cook it, which keeps it very, very soft. Yeah, without the salt in there, it's like the chili's in there and the mustard oil and the meat fat, but it's so soft, so we're keeping the base of the dish kind of, there's integrity and there's depth, but there's not a lot of like drive or aggression, which is kind of perfect. All right, so just breaks to read my recipe. So we're going to add the salt now. So from this point forward, we're going to start to sort of drive the flavours of the dish a little harder. So we're going to do 2.5 teaspoons of a fine pink salt. And we're going to let that have a little bit of fun. So it's going to draw a little bit. Salt will draw moisture out of meat. It will create interaction, the sodium between all the flavours. Yum. We're just going to prep the spices, and we're going to run the rest of the spices. We're just going to heat in a little frying pan that tomato puree. Run the spices through that, apply them into here, pop the potatoes on top, maybe add a little bit of water and pressure cook. Nearly there. All right, so I've got my little fry pan. Add the tomato puree, and then I am going to follow my recipe like I said. So we've got half a teaspoon turmeric powder, 2 teaspoons cumin seed, half a teaspoon of, where's our little spoon gone? Half a teaspoon of cumin powder. 3 teaspoons of coriander powder. And then half a teaspoon of cinnamon powder. That's it. Going to heat this. You've got to do it slowly because you know how tomato paste spits. Just going to turn this off for a second. So the reason that I turn this off is because I can hear it. And I can see, I don't want too much oil to come through. And now that there's salt in there with the meat, the salt will draw the moisture from the meat and it will kind of cook it down. And then once it cooks down the liquid, the oil starts to come through and you get like a lot stronger flavour. So I don't really want that. I want it to stay soft. So it's like it's a decision at every process to choose gentle flavour over aggressive flavour. And that's why masala is such a thoughtful practice, cooking these foods, because you have to be tuned to what's happening. You really can't ever walk away from the stove and leave things, not for any length of time. So it's part of the discipline, I guess. Just want it warmed. So when you taste this on its own, it actually has kind of like a garam masala quality, because it's like the same way that garam masala is very sort of round and top note and dusty. There's no salt in here, there's no heat in here, but there is a little bit of acidity with the tomato. It's actually really lovely. It's very gentle. All right, so this is going to go in. You got that? That's fine. And get stirred through. Along with Alright, so heat's going to go back on. The benefit of that tomato is it also adds liquid to the pressure cooker. We need to have liquid, not just oil in a pressure cooker, or the meat will stick under pressure. So about 400 grams of potatoes. Going in there. I'm going to taste it. Yummy. Like complex and earthy, but not driving, not aggressive, not even overly salty. Now, I might even put a little bit more salt in there to finish. Just a little bit of fleur de sel. The reason not like a fine white sea salt or like a kitchen, you know, cooking white salt or anything like that is that because, you know, we've used the pink salt deliberately, because pink salt has very gentle sodium quality. But also because, so adding the fleur de sel, it sort of pops like popping candy, the way the fleur de sel flaked salt has the volume. The salt dispersal on the tongue is just like this little fizzy, light experience of sodium. So it's going to play into the character of the dish. So I'm happy with that. All right. I'm going to put the lid on. One more taste. Yep, that's better. Keep it on high, give my stove a clean. So I'm just going to cook that under pressure for about 25 minutes and then let it release on its own, and then I'll show you the end result. So yeah, welcome back. So it's been around 30 minutes or so, and I actually probably longer. I let it cook for 25 minutes, turned it off, have let it depressurize. I'm going to open it up and show you what we've got. Oh, that looks good. Oh my gosh, that is perfect. All right, then let me explain to you what it means when I say perfect. So the potatoes breaking apart a little bit. You can see the color of it even looks warm, like because we haven't created too much browning. And look, the meat's still got some bounce, but see how it's also soft now. So if I push, it actually splits. So it's bouncy and soft. So you can sort of just get it off with the wooden spoon, but it still bounces a little. That's soft tension. And soft tension will equal soft flavour. Even the colour, stunning. Ah. Oh my gosh. It's so tender, it's like butter, literally. And the masala itself is just like, it's like the warmth you get from an open fire that's been on all day, and it's later in the evening and it's kind of dying down, but the room has that kind of really soft warm glow. You're warm from the inside out, but you could sit there all night, like not in the least bit too much. It's perfect. The key to using masala well is shown in this dish very beautifully, in that there is no single flavour that's enunciated. Instead, what you have is a sensory body experience of softness and warmth and coddling. And who doesn't want to be coddled every now and again? So yeah, it's a dish for those days, aloo gosht. Everyone's favourite dish.